Most new buildings feel forgettable. Smooth walls, sharp edges, sterile materials, clean, efficient, but empty. They don't invite you in. They don't ask you to feel. But step into something older, and it's different. The air shifts. The light softens. The walls seem to remember. This isn't about romance or nostalgia. It's about why old buildings feel better, on a human level. Let's talk about texture, time, and the quiet power of places that last. Old buildings engage the senses in ways that new buildings often do not. Walk into a centuries-old home, church, or library, and your body knows it before your mind does. The floor creaks, the air feels different, cool, maybe slightly musty. Your hand brushes the wall, and it's rough, uneven, solid. That surface might be stone, plaster, or aged wood, and it speaks without saying a word. These buildings don't just house people or objects, they surround you with experience. The materials used in older buildings are a large part of this sensory impact. Builders once used things like timber, brick, lime plaster, and stone because they were available and strong. Over time, those materials change. Wood darkens and wears where hands and feet have touched it. Stone holds heat or coolness, depending on the weather. Lime plaster shows cracks that trace its history. These changes are not flaws, they are a record of time. Modern materials try to prevent that kind of change. Drywall stays flat and pale. Engineered wood doesn't scuff in the same way real wood does. Vinyl flooring may be practical, but it offers no warmth. Everything is designed to look new and stay that way. It resists use instead of recording it. The result is that many new buildings feel blank. They don't interact with you. They ask you to pass through quietly and leave no trace. The sound in an old building is different too. Thick plaster walls and solid wood absorb sound. Your footsteps don't echo the same way they would in a steel and glass space. A conversation in a room with wooden floors and a beamed ceiling sounds intimate, not sharp. The space shapes the sound, making it feel personal. Modern buildings, especially large public ones, often bounce sound harshly. Materials like concrete and metal reflect noise instead of softening it. This creates a sense of distance, even when people are close. Light also behaves differently. In older buildings, window glass is sometimes uneven, creating small distortions in what you see. These imperfections catch the light and scatter it gently. The result is a glow rather than a glare. Walls are often painted with natural pigments that change slightly depending on the time of day. Morning sunlight on a textured wall is not the same as afternoon light on it. The building interacts with the sun in a daily rhythm. Many of these details come from the way things were made. Before industrial processes, builders worked by hand. That meant every beam, tile, or stone had small variations. A row of hand-thrown roof tiles isn't perfectly uniform. A carved doorframe might have one column slightly thicker than the other. These differences are not design flaws. They are human traces. We notice them even if we don't consciously recognize them. That recognition creates a kind of ease. There is a sense that someone built this place with care, not just to meet a code, but to last. And in lasting, it has gathered marks: wear on a stair tread, polish on a doorknob, smoke darkening a ceiling beam. All of these tell you something happened here. You are not the first. That knowledge is grounding. It adds depth to your experience of the space. In contrast, modern spaces often feel smooth. Glass walls, white surfaces, and flush finishes all aim for perfection. But that perfection can create distance. It feels like a showroom. You are not supposed to leave a mark. That can make people feel hesitant or disconnected, even if they can't explain why. Suppose you are standing in a historic town square. The paving stones beneath your feet are worn unevenly. They tell you people have walked here for hundreds of years. Buildings around you lean slightly. Their windows don't quite match in size. The air carries a faint scent of earth and dust. Now compare that to standing in a new shopping center. The tiles are flawless. The lighting is bright and even. The temperature is controlled. There is no smell. Both are functional, but only one offers something beyond function. That something is a sense of life. Old buildings have it because they interact with us. They allow their materials to speak through touch, sight, and sound. They don't try to hide age. Instead, they let age become part of their character. You feel welcome to slow down, to look more closely, to touch the wall or notice how the light hits a stair at sunset. These moments matter. They stay with us. We might forget the exact layout of a modern building, but we remember the echo in an old stone hall or the way sunlight filtered through a warped window pane. These sensory details anchor memory. They make a place feel specific, not generic. And when a place feels specific, it starts to matter. Not every old building does this. Some were built poorly or have aged badly, but the best examples show how texture and material can shape experience. A rough stone wall invites your hand. A worn wooden floor shows you where people walked. Thick plaster keeps a room cool in summer and quiet in winter. These features aren't luxuries. They're practical choices that happen to create beauty. When architects today try to recreate that feeling, they often mimic the look but miss the substance. Faux beams or rustic finishes may resemble the real thing, but they don't carry the same weight. The materials haven't aged. The surface is skin deep. The building hasn't earned its texture. We sense that. The value of old buildings is not just in their history, but in how they make us feel. That feeling comes from materials that change, that respond to touch, that hold sound and light in subtle ways. It comes from the small marks people leave behind. It comes from a design that was made to be used, not just viewed. In a world that moves fast and flattens experience, those qualities are rare. But they still speak. They remind us that buildings can do more than shelter us. They can connect us to time, to place, and to each other. Old buildings do this quietly, through the senses, one texture at a time. Natural materials age in a way that tells a story. Walk past an old brick wall and you'll see it. Dark streaks from rain, chipped corners from decades of wear, patches of moss in the mortar joints. These aren't flaws. They're part of the wall's surface memory. Brick, timber, stone, copper. These materials don't try to stay perfect. They change, and in doing so, they become more interesting. Timber offers one of the clearest examples. A new wooden beam looks smooth and light in color. Over the years, it darkens. Sunlight deepens its tone. The grain becomes more visible. In places where hands have touched it often, stair rails, door frames, tabletops, it becomes polished through use. These areas shine slightly, not because of a finish, but because of friction in time. The surface becomes something you want to run your hand over. That kind of polish can't be faked. It comes from living with the material. Now compare that to laminate. Laminate flooring or cabinets may look like wood at first glance, but they're printed surfaces, thin plastic on top of compressed fiberboard. They don't change over time. If they do, it's usually by peeling or bubbling. They wear out rather than wearing in. You can't sand them down or refinish them. When they look old, they go in the trash. Timber, on the other hand, can be repaired, sanded, stained, oiled, or left alone. Either way, it stays valuable. Brick behaves in a similar way. Older bricks are often irregular in size and color. This wasn't a flaw. It was a result of hand-fired kilns and clay with variable mineral content. Over time, the surfaces of these bricks wear. Edges soften. Some bricks darken, especially near the ground where they absorb more moisture. Others fade in areas exposed to sun. The result is a kind of mosaic, one that grows over time rather than being designed all at once. Modern materials often avoid this kind of change. Factory-made bricks are uniform in size, shape, and color. Builders pick a tone and expect it to remain stable for decades. But that stability also means the material doesn't evolve. A 20-year-old brick wall made with modern brick looks mostly the same as the day it was finished. It may be clean, but it hasn't gained anything from the passage of time. Copper is another material that changes in a striking way. When first installed, copper gutters or roofing flash bright and metallic. Over time, exposure to the elements turns them brown, then dark gray, and eventually green. This green patina is a form of corrosion, but it also protects the copper from further decay. Architects used to understand and welcome this transformation. A green copper roof signaled maturity and resilience. It also gave a building a visual sense of time. Today, many buildings cover copper with coatings to keep it looking new. In doing so, they erase the chance for it to develop a natural finish. Stone also holds time visibly. Think of a staircase in an old public building. The middle of each step may be dipped slightly, worn smooth by thousands of feet. That pattern of wear shows how people move through space. It's not decorative, it's functional erosion. Sandstone and limestone show this clearly. Their surfaces dull over time, not in a way that looks broken, but in a way that reflects use. Modern concrete steps can be just as strong, but they chip and crack in ways that feel accidental, not earned. Even metals like bronze or iron develop richer character through exposure. Bronze door handles gain a darker finish from skin oils. Iron railings develop fine layers of rust that, when maintained, don't weaken the material but add texture and depth. These materials change in ways that communicate presence. They show that a building has been used and cared for. The message they send is quiet, but it's powerful. Synthetic materials, by contrast, are designed to resist this process. Vinyl siding is made to look consistent. Painted drywall is supposed to stay flat and smooth. Acrylic countertops keep their shine for years, then lose it all at once. When they fail, they don't fail gracefully. They crack, peel, or discolor in ways that feel like a breakdown. They don't become more themselves, they fall apart. That's the difference between aging and degrading. You can see this difference in homes, especially kitchens. A 100-year-old kitchen might have soapstone countertops, wood cabinets, and brass hardware. Over time, the stone darkens, the cabinet corners wear down, and the brass softens in color. But the space still works. In fact, it works better because it holds history. A new kitchen with acrylic counters, particle board drawers, and chrome handles might look clean at first, but it can't change gracefully. When it shows wear, it looks tired, not seasoned. People respond to these changes, even if they don't always know why. A surface with a patina draws the eye. A doorknob that's been polished by use feels familiar, even comforting. These signs of age signal that something has been used, kept, and valued. There's also a difference in how these materials invite care. You can refinish wood, you can repoint brick, you can clean and oil stone. These tasks are part of maintaining a living surface. They don't require replacing everything. With modern materials, maintenance often means starting over. The surface doesn't hold memory, it just hides problems until they're too big to ignore. In cities where older buildings remain, this layered effect is clear. A weathered stone facade might sit beside a new glass office block. The older building may be rougher, less reflective, but it often feels more grounded. Its surfaces carry rain stains, plant growth, small chips from decades of urban life. These aren't eyesores, they're evidence. They say, this building has stood through seasons, weather, and time. That kind of surface memory gives old materials their appeal. It doesn't come from style, it comes from substance. Natural materials are allowed to change, and we learn to read those changes. A floor worn in one spot tells you where people like to stand. A handrail polished smooth shows how many people used it. These aren't design features, they're the result of time. Buildings that let materials show their age feel real. They aren't trying to pretend they're new. They aren't trying to hide that people live and move inside them. This honesty is what draws us in. It tells us that a place can grow, not just get old. It tells us that time adds value, not just damage. That's what beautiful aging looks like. Craftsmanship adds detail that draws the eye and holds your attention. It gives a building personality and warmth. You can see it in hand-carved stone around a doorway, in the shape of a wooden stair rail, or in the scroll of a wrought iron gate. These elements don't serve only a structural purpose. They offer something more, a human quality that connects you to the person who made them. Walk up to an old church or courthouse, and you might find stone blocks around the entrance that have been carved with patterns, initials, or symbols. Each one took time to shape. You can still see the chisel marks if you look closely. Those lines weren't made by a machine. A person stood there with a tool and made small, repeated motions until the design emerged. That process leaves a kind of fingerprint. It's not perfect, and that's the point. The small variations tell you it was made by hand. The eye picks up on that, even if you don't realize it at first. Or think about wooden moldings in a house built 100 years ago. The corners might be slightly uneven. The curves of the trim aren't identical from one room to the next. A machine today could produce flawless copies, but when it's done by hand, each piece carries its own rhythm. These differences give the room texture. They create a feeling of depth and attention. Wrought iron offers another good example. A metal gate or railing made by a blacksmith won't look machine-made. It might have small asymmetries in the curves. The iron may be a bit thinner in one place than another. It may hold a slight twist that came from being bent and shaped over fire. None of this weakens the material. Instead, it gives it life. A cold-rolled steel gate from a factory might be smooth and even, but it will never have that same presence. These details matter because they ask you to slow down and notice. You can walk past a modern wall and forget it immediately. But if a stone lintel has been carved with a simple motif, leaves, vines, waves, you're more likely to pause. That pause becomes a memory. You remember the place because of that moment of attention. Craftsmanship creates those moments by giving your eye something to hold on to. It also makes a space feel cared for. When you see detailed work, you know someone spent time there. It sends a quiet message. This place mattered enough for someone to shape it, not just build it. That message doesn't fade with time. In fact, it grows stronger as the object ages. A carved newel post on a staircase might be smooth where hands have touched it for decades. That wear adds to the story. It's not just the shape that matters, it's the fact that someone shaped it and others have lived with it. This kind of work often happens in parts of a building people use most: door handles, railings, windowsills, mantels. These are places where our hands go naturally. When they're shaped with care, they feel better. A turned wooden banister fits the hand. A metal latch that has been shaped and balanced swings smoothly into place. These pieces become familiar. They belong to the experience of using the space. Machine-made parts can do the same job, but they don't offer the same connection. They might last just as long. They might even look more finished, but they don't say anything about the person who made them. You can't read the maker's process in a perfect piece of stamped metal. You don't see the time it took to file an edge or curve a scroll. That absence leaves the object flat. In older buildings, you sometimes see work that goes beyond what was needed. A mason adds a row of decorative brickwork near the roofline. A carpenter shapes the ends of exposed rafters into curves. A plasterer adds a rosette to the ceiling, even though it serves no structural purpose. These details don't cost much in terms of material. What they take is time. Time is what most modern construction tries to reduce. But when time is put into shaping and finishing by hand, the results last in more ways than one. You can feel the difference in the atmosphere of a space. A home or library with built-in bookcases, deep window seats, and carved mantels feels different from one with flat walls and factory-grade trim. It's not just about style, it's about the depth that detail brings. Your eye moves across the space and keeps finding small moments to hold on to. That activity keeps your attention in the room. You feel more present. Older urban areas show this clearly. Look at the older parts of a European city or a well-preserved historic district in the US. Buildings there might not be grand, but they have detail. Even small apartment buildings often have ornamented lintels, cast-iron grates, and hand-painted signs. These aren't luxury features. They're signs of a culture that valued appearance as part of daily life. Sometimes this work happens in places few people will ever look. A beam in an attic might have initials carved into it. A drain pipe might have a decorative bracket. These touches weren't required, but someone did them anyway. That attitude, doing something well because it matters, even if no one sees it, is a core part of traditional craftsmanship. It's one reason old buildings feel solid and trustworthy. You sense that someone put care into every part, not just the visible ones. Even the flaws in this kind of work add to its appeal. A carved column that's slightly off-center doesn't ruin a space. It gives it charm. It shows that the piece wasn't made by a machine, but by a person. Those marks of effort remind us what went into the building. They make us feel closer to it. This is why historic buildings often feel more personal, even when they are large or formal. The details invite us in. They remind us that a building is not just a container for people, it's something people shaped. Craftsmanship isn't about decoration alone. It's about attention, care, and time. Those things are built into the object, and we can still feel them long after the work is done. Buildings carry memory in ways we often feel before we understand. You can stand in an old room and know, without needing to be told, that others stood there long before you. The worn steps, faded paint, and uneven floors tell you more than a plaque ever could. These are not just signs of age, they are records of use. The building itself holds traces of the people who lived, worked, or passed through it. That's what makes old architecture more than just shelter. It becomes a kind of document. You are walking into an old train station. The floor under the main arch is made of stone tiles, polished by years of foot traffic. A brass rail is dull where thousands of hands have gripped it. You notice how the stairs dip slightly in the center, worn down by passengers moving quickly to catch trains. These aren't design choices. They are the result of movement, habit, and time. They're not accidental either. They form a visible history, a kind of map of human behavior built into the structure. Every building changes over time, but older buildings often show these changes instead of hiding them. A crack in the plaster, a door that sticks slightly in its frame, a smooth patch on the wall where people rest their hands, these things speak to long use. They create a sense of continuity. Someone was here before. That sense becomes even stronger when you see signs of past repairs. A stone replaced with a slightly different color, a patched area on a timber beam. These details reveal the building's own lifespan, shaped not by design updates but by care. In many modern buildings, this kind of evidence is erased. When something breaks, it's replaced with a perfect match. Floors are designed to wear evenly or to hide wear altogether. Surfaces resist change. In offices or apartment buildings built in the last few decades, the only signs of age are often marks of neglect. Peeling paint, stained carpet, flickering lights. These don't tell a story. They don't suggest history. They just signal disrepair. In contrast, a building that ages with care holds layers of history that are both visible and meaningful. Think of a library built in the early 1900s. The wood floors might creak in specific spots. Chairs and tables show scratches from generations of readers. There may be marks on the edge of a desk where someone carved their initials. Each mark is small, but together they create an atmosphere. You know this space has been used by real people for a long time. You don't need to know their names to feel their presence. The architecture holds that memory. Older homes show this on a more personal scale. In a kitchen, a countertop might have a worn corner where someone always prepared food. The edge of a cupboard door may be smoothed from repeated use. A back staircase might be narrow and steep, its banister polished by generations of hands. These signs of use aren't damage, they're reminders of life. They show where people moved, where they paused, where they lived their everyday routines. A house that has been lived in becomes a kind of physical diary. This is one reason certain buildings feel comforting. We may not know their full history, but we recognize the marks of time. Our senses pick up on it. It's not just about seeing old things, it's about how the environment reflects long use. That reflection helps us feel grounded. We understand, even without explanation, that we are part of a longer story. The building makes space for memory, and we respond to that. In some buildings, memory is more deliberate. A church might have engraved stones, listing the names of past members. A school may have carved initials from students who passed through decades ago. A courthouse might have the same wooden benches used for generations of trials. These features are not decorative. They are part of the building's identity. Removing them would change the feeling of the space entirely. They remind people not just of the function of the building, but of its role in the community over time. Even the way light moves in old buildings can carry memory. In a warehouse built a century ago, large windows might let in long bars of light that fall across the floor in the late afternoon. Those same patterns of light would have been seen by workers decades ago. That repetition matters. The light becomes a kind of ritual. It's something that ties the present to the past, quietly and without announcement. This kind of memory exists not only in grand buildings, but also in small, unassuming ones. A corner store from the 1920s might have a wooden counter worn down in the center. The door may have a bell that rings in a way you remember from childhood. The front steps might lean slightly where people always step in the same spot. These traces matter just as much as the carvings in a cathedral. They speak to daily life. They help preserve a local story. Architectural memory isn't always neat or polished. Sometimes it's a missing piece of molding, or a room with two types of flooring where a wall once stood. These irregularities tell us that the building adapted, that someone changed it based on need, not fashion. This kind of memory is valuable because it reflects real use. It's not a design feature added for effect. It's what happens when people live in a space over time. Historic buildings often reflect layers of different uses. A building might start as a home, become a shop, then serve as offices. Each change leaves traces: a blocked-up fireplace, a door that no longer leads anywhere, a patch in the floor that doesn't match the rest. These signs are often seen as quirks, but they're also stories. They show that the building was flexible, that it adapted to people's lives, that it didn't need to be perfect to be useful. Even in ruins, architecture holds memory. A stone wall with no roof still shows how it was built. You can see the effort in the way the stones were shaped and stacked. You can imagine the hands that placed them. In that way, the building continues to speak. It continues to tell its story, even when no one lives there anymore. Memory in architecture isn't just about age. It's about evidence. Evidence of people, of time, of change. Old buildings don't erase their past. They let it remain visible, sometimes in small details, sometimes in whole structures. That visibility gives them meaning. It connects us to something larger than ourselves. It helps us understand our place in a longer chain of time. When we enter these buildings, we enter a shared space, not just physically, but across time. The architecture doesn't just house us. It includes us in a story that began long before we arrived. And in that way, buildings carry memory, not as decoration, but as part of their very structure. Older buildings were made to last. You can feel it in the weight of a door, the thickness of a wall, the way the roofline holds steady after 100 winters. These buildings weren't made with speed in mind. They weren't trying to hit a deadline or meet a sales target. They were built with the idea that people would live in them, work in them, and pass them down. That intention shows in every part of the structure. Look at an old timber frame house. The beams are massive, often cut from whole trees. They carry weight with ease and resist movement. Joinery, mortise and tenon, pegged connections, holds the structure together without relying on glue or nails. The builders expected the house to stand for generations, and they built it that way. Even when the roof leaks or the windows sag, the bones hold. That's not just skill, that's commitment. Walk into an old brick school or factory. The walls are thick enough to absorb sound and hold heat. You don't hear every footstep echo through the halls. You feel protected. These buildings used local materials, brick fired nearby, stone quarried down the road. They weren't chosen for appearance alone. They were chosen for their performance. And because the builders knew the materials well, they knew how to work with them. The buildings aged, but they didn't fall apart. Now think about many buildings made today. Thin walls, light framing, low-cost finishes. The roof might last 20 years if maintained. The windows might start to fog in 10. The exterior might look modern, but it covers systems designed for short-term use. That's not always the builder's fault. The market pushes for speed. Projects must meet budgets, hit deadlines, deliver profit. That often means using materials that are fast to install and cheap to replace. This changes the way buildings feel. You might not notice at first, but the difference becomes clear over time. Drywall dents with a bump, plastic trim cracks in the sun, engineered wood warps with moisture. The space begins to show wear, not as character, but as failure. You walk through, and instead of seeing patina, you see damage. Older buildings wear differently. A hardwood floor darkens in high-traffic spots. A stone step hollows where feet land over decades. These signs of use don't weaken the building. They enrich it. They show life. That's because the materials can take it. They were chosen to endure. And they don't just survive, they improve. Wood softens, metal oxidizes, brick settles. These changes mark time, not decay. The proportions of old buildings also speak of permanence. Rooms are balanced. Ceilings are high enough to breathe, low enough to warm. Window placement follows function, light where you need it, not where a facade requires symmetry. The parts fit the people. When you stand in a room like that, you don't think about lifespan. You just feel at ease. The space has held others. It can hold you. Permanence also affects how people treat a building. When you know a place will last, you act with care. You maintain it, you adapt it, you hand it off. A house meant to stand for 100 years will be patched, repainted, repaired. It becomes part of a family's story. The materials invite that care. They can be worked with. A plaster wall can be recoated, a wood sill can be sanded, a copper gutter can be patched. The building expects it. Compare that to a newer house where surfaces are glued down and systems are sealed. Once a piece fails, you replace it, not because it's cheaper, but because it's the only option. You can't repair a vinyl window with heat damage. You can't refinish laminate. You rip out and start over. That kind of building asks for turnover, not investment. It becomes disposable. In cities, this shift changes the landscape. A row of older brick buildings may stay for over a century. They hold shops, apartments, studios. They adapt. The walls stay, even if the inside changes. Meanwhile, new developments often have a short cycle. Built to flip, designed to sell, not to stay. After 20 or 30 years, they look tired. The systems age out. The cost of fixing them outweighs the return, so they go down. This mindset affects more than structure. It affects design. Older buildings use features like deep eaves, thick sills, double-hung windows, and cross-ventilation. These weren't style choices. They were ways to make the building work over time. A deep eave protects the wall from rain. A thick sill gives strength and a place to sit. Cross-ventilation keeps rooms cool before air conditioning. These features cost more up front, but they paid off in decades of use. Modern buildings often skip these features. Roofs are flatter, windows are fixed, materials are layered thin, climate control covers the gaps. These solutions work for a while, but when the systems fail, the building struggles. It wasn't designed to breathe on its own. It wasn't designed to manage heat, cold, or rain without help. You notice it during a power outage. You notice it when the bill climbs. You also notice it in the feel of the place. An old stone church stays cool on a hot day. A wood-framed house from 1900 creaks in the wind, but holds steady. These buildings were made with a longer view. They weren't chasing trends or trying to meet code at the lowest cost. They were built by people who expected their work to outlive them. That expectation changes the result. It shapes the form, the finish, the structure. When permanence is the goal, every choice shifts. Corners are reinforced, roofs are pitched for runoff, joinery is tested, and the building carries that intention in its body. You feel it when you enter. You sense the care. The space doesn't ask for attention. It offers presence. Permanence is not about nostalgia. It's about respect, for material, for craft, for time. When a builder knows the wall will stand for a century, they treat it differently. When an owner knows the house will hold their children's children, they maintain it differently. These buildings don't just last longer. They live better. Architectural styles are not just visual choices. They hold meaning. They show what people cared about, how they saw the world, and how they wanted to live. You can feel this when you walk through a Gothic cathedral or a Tudor cottage. Even if you don't know the name of the style, you sense something. The form creates a mood. That mood is tied to the culture that made it. Gothic buildings, for example, rise. Their walls stretch upward. Their windows are tall and narrow. Their ceilings lift high above your head. You feel small, but not lost. You look up, and the space leads your eye to the top. In a church or cathedral, that vertical pull had a purpose. It aimed toward the divine. The builders didn't just want shelter. They wanted to reflect heaven. They used stone, light, and space to shape that goal, and you can still feel it now. Even if you don't share the belief, the structure speaks. Tudor homes tell a different story. These buildings often show half-timbered walls, low roof lines, and uneven layouts. The rooms don't match. The windows vary in size. The walls lean a little, but the whole thing feels warm. It feels lived in. That's because it came from a time when homes grew piece by piece. People added rooms as they could. The shape followed need. The result was comfort, not symmetry. This style reflects a slower, local way of building. It says home matters more than display. These messages are not accidents. Style is not just about looks. It's a language. Each period of history had its own needs and values. Architecture shows those values in form. Classical buildings, for example, use columns, symmetry, and proportion. They reflect ideas from ancient Greece and Rome: order, balance, reason. These buildings were often used for government, schools, and banks. The style was chosen not for trend, but for message. It said, "This is a place of structure. This is a place you can trust." Baroque architecture, on the other hand, was about power. Think of large staircases, curved lines, and dramatic contrast. These elements came from a time when churches and monarchies wanted to impress. They used architecture to hold attention. When you walk through a Baroque palace, you don't just look, you feel overwhelmed. That's the point. The design speaks of control, wealth, and drama. The building becomes a stage. You are the audience. Even simpler styles carry meaning. A craftsman house might not be large, but it shows care. You see hand-built railings, exposed beams, low-pitched roofs. This style grew out of a reaction to industrial mass production. People wanted homes that felt human again. The design says, this was made with effort. This was made for life at a slower pace. When you sit on a craftsman porch, you feel close to the street, close to others. The architecture pulls people out, not in. Modernism came with different goals. Flat roofs, open plans, large glass walls. These were meant to break with the past. Architects wanted to remove decoration, strip down form, and focus on use. That idea had strength. It matched a time of growth, change, and rebuilding after war. The form reflected hope and efficiency, but as the style spread, it became harder to connect with. When copied without care, modernism turned cold. Buildings lost touch with place. The message became unclear. Postmodernism tried to fix that by bringing back detail and variety. Architects added curves, color, and strange shapes. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it confused. Still, it showed how deeply style connects to culture. When a building looks playful or strange, it tells you something about the time it came from. Maybe people were tired of rules, maybe they wanted surprise. Either way, the style carried a message. Not all styles speak clearly to everyone. Cultural background, personal memory, and local context all shape what people feel. A thatched cottage might feel charming in one place, but outdated in another. A concrete tower might feel strong to some and cold to others. But this doesn't mean the message is lost. It means style needs context. It grows from it. This is why old buildings feel different than new ones. They don't just look different. They carry meaning shaped by their time. That meaning still touches us. A brick schoolhouse with a bell tower shows pride in education. A row of brownstones with stoops shows social rhythm, places where people once sat, talked, watched the street. These forms speak. You don't need a guidebook, you feel it. Style also reflects what was possible. Materials shape design. In stone you carve, in wood you join, in steel you span, but beyond limits, materials carry tone. A limestone wall feels different than a glass one. A copper roof changes with age. These choices add to meaning. They say, we built this with care, or we built this to last, or we built this fast. Even without knowing the process, you see the result. You feel it in the joints, the corners, the surface. When style gets reduced to surface, the message breaks. A fake Tudor house with plastic beams doesn't carry the same weight. A faux colonial office with vinyl siding doesn't offer the same tone. The eye catches the copy. The body senses the lack. Style without meaning feels thin. It looks the part, but it says nothing. Real architectural style connects time, place, and people. It shows what mattered when the building rose. That may be belief, pride, comfort, or change. The forms give it shape. The shapes give it voice. When we walk through those spaces now, we hear that voice. We don't always know the words, but we understand the feeling. That's the power of style, rooted in culture. It turns a building into a message you can stand inside. Old buildings often feel better because they were built to fit people. Their size, shape, and layout follow the human body. When you walk down a narrow street lined with old houses or shops, the space feels right. You can see across it. You can hear footsteps and voices. You feel part of it. That's not a mistake. That's scale, specifically human scale. It makes a difference. Many older buildings were made before cars were common. Streets were built for walking. Buildings were built to be used without machines. Doors were sized for the reach of an arm. Windows were placed for natural light, not for symmetry from the outside. Ceilings were high enough for air to move, but low enough to feel shelter. Stairs rose at a pace that matched the step of the average foot. None of this needed theory. Builders worked from habit, from their own bodies, from direct use. The result is space that feels familiar. You don't have to adjust to it. It meets you. A porch that's just wide enough for two people to sit and talk. A window ledge that holds a mug or a book. A street where you can greet someone across the way without raising your voice. These are small things, but they matter. They shape how we interact. They create comfort. Now think about many new buildings. They often stretch large, both in height and footprint. Tall ceilings, vast lobbies, open plans. From a distance, they look clean and grand. But when you stand in them, something feels off. You speak, and your voice echoes. You reach, and the light switch feels too far. You sit, and the furniture floats in too much space. These places aren't built around people. They're built around systems, air handling, fire codes, efficiency models. That can serve a purpose, but it can also leave people feeling lost. A city block built in the early 1900s. The buildings are no more than 4 stories tall. Ground floors hold shops with signs you can read from the sidewalk. Windows open. Doors feel solid. You can walk the whole block and take in every detail. You don't need to crane your neck. You don't feel small. You feel included. Now a new development with glass towers and wide streets. The buildings loom. The sidewalk runs next to a 6-lane road. Storefronts sit behind tinted glass. Signs are meant to be read from a moving car, not by a person on foot. You walk there, and the scale tells you this place isn't made for you. It's made for flow, for traffic, delivery, volume. You become a unit in a system, not a person in a place. Old buildings also carry texture. A narrow doorway, a thick wall, a carved edge. These invite you to come close. You can touch them. You can rest against them. They give you reference points. Your hand finds the rail because it's shaped for it. Your shoulder brushes the wall because it's close, not because the hall is too tight. These small interactions matter. They make the body feel at home. This is not just about old houses or cozy cottages. Even industrial or civic buildings from the past often reflect human scale. A train station might have high arches, but it also has benches placed for comfort. A courthouse might rise tall, but its steps follow the natural rhythm of walking. Its facade might be grand, but the doorknob is still where your hand expects it to be. Older cities built this way create a sense of welcome. You don't need to learn how to use them. You already know. You slow your step in a narrow lane. You pause under an overhang. You sit on a stoop because it's the right height. These responses come from your body, not from signs or rules. The city fits you, and you fit the city. Modern buildings often break this fit. They go large to impress or to save money per square foot. But that size can overwhelm. A single-family home with a 2-story entryway and oversized windows might look dramatic, but it doesn't feel better inside. The echo makes it hard to relax. The proportions stretch comfort. Instead of resting, your senses stay alert, trying to orient. In public buildings, this disconnect grows. Many schools, hospitals, and offices now use broad corridors, high ceilings, and blank walls. These may serve function, but they lack reference. You don't know where to go or where to look. Nothing feels scaled to your body. You might not know why you feel tired after a visit, but you do. Human scale also shows in detail. Older buildings often have trim, molding, columns, or frames that break up large surfaces. These aren't just decoration. They give the eye a place to land. They offer scale markers. You see the size of the door in relation to the window. You see the width of the bricks in relation to the wall. These cues help the brain map the space. You feel oriented. Without those cues, everything blends. A blank white wall in a modern hallway gives no sense of depth or distance. A continuous glass surface gives no break for the eye. These spaces are hard to read, and when spaces are hard to read, they become harder to use. People avoid them or rush through. Even small changes in proportion make a big difference. A step that's too tall becomes a hazard. A counter that's too wide becomes unreachable. A chair that's too deep becomes uncomfortable. Old builders got these things right more often because they were building from use, not models. They built what they needed, and what they needed matched the body. Human scale also encourages interaction. A front porch close to the sidewalk invites greetings. A bench under a low window encourages pause. When spaces fit us, we spend more time in them. We speak, we stay, we share. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens through proportion. Many people don't know why they feel better in old buildings, but the body knows. The eye knows. The hand reaching for a knob, the foot stepping on a stair, the voice echoing in a room. All these actions tell us whether a space was made for us. In older buildings, they often were. Old buildings ask us to slow down. They don't demand it. They invite it. You step through a worn doorway, hear the creak of the floor, feel the cool weight of a stone wall, and you pause. You look, you take a breath. These places work on us without saying a word. Their surfaces and shapes hold attention. They don't rush, they don't flash or shout, they wait. New buildings often focus on efficiency. Flat walls, smooth floors, straight lines, easy to clean, easy to build, easy to repeat. These spaces work well when speed matters. But speed isn't always what we need. Sometimes we need stillness. Old buildings offer that, not through function, but through form. Think of a room with high ceilings, thick walls, and tall windows with deep sills. The light comes in slow, filtered by age and angle. Dust hangs in the air. You sit down, and your posture changes. The room does something to your body. It settles you. Not because you chose to slow down, but because the space made it feel natural. You're not looking for the next thing. You're in the thing. This kind of slowness matters. In a fast environment, our attention jumps. We scan instead of see. In an old space, things don't reveal themselves all at once. A carved stair rail, a handmade tile, a patch in the wall where plaster meets brick. These details pull the eye gently. They ask us to notice, not consume. And when we notice, we reflect. Reflection doesn't need to mean deep thought or planning. It can mean simply being where you are, feeling the chair beneath you, listening to the wind move the windows, smelling old wood and faded paint. These small things matter. They give the mind space to move in its own time. A building that slows you down doesn't have to explain itself. You feel the effect. Some places do this by accident. A train station with arched ceilings and heavy columns might not be meant for stillness, but it creates it. You look up and your eyes linger. You wait for a train and time stretches. The stone holds cold air. The echo softens footsteps. The whole space slows your pace, even as trains rush in and out. Now think of a modern waiting room. Bright lights, white walls, vinyl chairs, a screen on every surface. No detail asks you to pause. No texture offers touch. These spaces are made to pass through, not to stay in. They keep your body moving and your mind restless. You sit, but you don't settle. Old buildings work differently. They give us surfaces that speak. A worn threshold tells of footsteps. A wood beam shows the tool marks left by someone long gone. You run your hand along it and you feel time. This is not just about beauty. It's about contact. It's about friction. Newer spaces often remove friction. They are made to be smooth, but friction slows us down in useful ways. It gives us something to push against, something to hold. A library in a church-turned-public space, for example, might have stained glass windows, thick wooden tables, and stone floors. Each of those elements changes how people behave. They lower their voices. They walk more slowly. They notice their surroundings. That kind of behavior is not forced. It's shaped. The space shapes it. Modern offices aim to increase speed. Open plans, glass walls, white noise machines. The focus is on productivity. But in these environments, people often feel ungrounded. Their attention drifts, their focus breaks. There's nothing to rest it on. An old office, maybe a converted house or a repurposed industrial space, often feels different. You notice the radiator, the light fixture, the marks on the windowsill. These give the eye something to land on. That gives the mind time to rest. Materials play a role. Old buildings use materials that age. Wood darkens, metal rusts, stone shows wear. These signs of age are not flaws. They are signs of use, of presence. A space that shows use invites you to add your own. That creates a loop of care. You move more carefully, more slowly, because the place seems to deserve it. Consider two staircases. One is a steel fire stair with sharp edges and graded steps. You walk fast. You don't touch the rail. You look at your phone. The other is a wide wood stair, maybe a bit uneven, with a carved rail that curves with your hand. You walk more slowly. You feel the rise and fall of each step. You arrive differently. Even sound works this way. New buildings often dampen sound to silence. It feels dead. Old buildings shape sound. A creak in the floor, a voice echoing down a hallway, the click of shoes on tile. These sounds aren't noise, they're signals. They remind you that the space has depth, that others have walked here before, that you're part of a longer story, that changes how you move. Old churches, libraries, inns, and schools often carry this sense. They have nooks, corners, thresholds. Not everything is open. Not everything is clear. You move through them in stages. That movement creates reflection. You don't go straight from one task to another. You pass through shadow, light, narrow, wide. These transitions slow the mind. They make room for thought. There's no magic in old buildings. They don't fix everything, but they shape experience in ways we often miss. They resist the flatness of speed. They hold time. They let us pause without asking. They don't say slow down. They show us how. That showing is what makes the difference. It's not an idea. It's a structure, a wall that holds the warmth of the sun, a chair that leans slightly from years of use, a room that stays quiet even when full. These things change how we feel. They change how we move. And when we move differently, we think differently. That change starts small. One glance, one pause, one quiet breath, but it adds up. In a world that asks us to move fast, these spaces give us permission to move slow, not with effort, but with ease. And in that slowness, we notice, we reflect, we return to ourselves. Old buildings help us know where we are. They root us in place. In a city that changes fast, where glass towers rise in months and streets get remade overnight, an old brick warehouse or stone church offers something solid. It doesn't move, it doesn't change much, and it gives us a sense of belonging. We don't just pass by, we remember. A city without old buildings loses its memory. When every corner looks the same, there's no way to tell one block from another. This is more than a visual problem, it's a loss of orientation. We use landmarks to know where we are, to know how far we've come, and even to know who we are. These buildings help us read the city. They act like anchors. Without them, we drift. Think about a small town center. Maybe there's a post office with marble counters, a diner with its original stools, or a hardware store with wood floors worn from 100 years of boots. These aren't just businesses. They're part of the map people carry in their heads. Now think about a strip mall at the edge of a freeway. You could be in any state. You could be anywhere. That sameness erases history. It flattens culture. You can't connect with a place that doesn't know its own shape. Old architecture doesn't just help us see place, it helps us feel time. A courthouse from the 1800s, a synagogue built by early immigrants, a row house that survived a war, these hold memory. Not personal memory, but shared memory. Cultural memory. These buildings tell us, without speaking, what a place has lived through. They show us that we are not the first and won't be the last. That knowledge can ground us. It helps people feel part of something bigger than themselves. Even if we don't know the exact story of a building, we know it has one. That feeling creates respect. You walk past a stone school with carved names above the door and feel its presence. You may not know the teachers or the students who came through its halls, but you know they existed. The building tells you that. It holds their footsteps in its floors. It held their voices in its walls. Some of these buildings carry pain. Others carry pride. Most carry both. A factory might remind a city of its working-class past, of both struggle and skill. A train station might speak of travel, of migration, of loss. The meaning changes with the people who live near it. That's part of the value. These buildings stay while people come and go. They hold what came before, even when no one speaks of it. Cities that erase their old buildings often try to make up for it by naming things after what used to be there. A new condo complex might be called Mill Yard Lofts, though no mill remains. A street might get a plaque noting that it once held a jazz club or a labor hall. These gestures try to link present to past, but without the physical space, they often fall flat. A name alone can't carry memory the way stone or timber can. Some cities keep their old buildings, but strip them of context. They leave a brick facade standing while building a tower behind it. They frame a single wall of a torn-down church inside a shopping mall. These fragments suggest a connection, but often feel hollow. A real link to history needs more than a surface. It needs space, material, and time to breathe. When we lose old buildings, we don't just lose materials, we lose patterns. We lose the shape of streets built for feet and carts, not cars. We lose the small gaps between buildings where wind moves differently and light angles in unexpected ways. These details shape how we move through a place. They shape how we talk to neighbors, how we pause, how we remember. New buildings often ignore those older patterns. They fill space in a different way. They press against the street. They leave little room for pause. Old buildings remind us that we inherit places. We don't create them from scratch. Even if we knock everything down and start over, the land still holds what came before. The soil still carries traces, foundations, pipes, bones. We walk on layers of past decisions. Old architecture makes those layers visible. It lets us see the work of others. That can change how we build today. It can make us more careful, more aware. There's also value in repetition. When we see a row of old houses with the same roofline and porch style, we see a time when homes were made not just for function, but for form. When builders repeated certain features, they weren't just being efficient, they were creating a rhythm. That rhythm helps us recognize a neighborhood. It helps us feel at home. Some of this connection is unconscious. We may not be able to explain why an old stone wall feels better than a sheetrock one, but our senses respond. The texture, the wear, the way it meets the ground, it all signals that we are somewhere specific, somewhere lived in, somewhere with history. That feeling can shape behavior. People often treat old places with more care. They step more lightly, they speak more quietly. Not always, but often enough to notice. There's a reason so many protest when old buildings face demolition. Even if they don't go inside, even if they've never looked closely at the windows or cornices, people feel a loss. They feel that something solid is being taken away, something that helped hold the shape of the city. The outcry isn't always about the architecture itself. It's about memory. And once memory is gone, it can't be rebuilt. Old buildings help us face change. They remind us that places evolve, but also endure. When we see them, we see both what was and what is. That blend gives us a sense of time, of story, of place. Without them, we lose the thread. And once it's gone, it's hard to find again. Old buildings draw us in. We might say it's nostalgia, but there's more to it. These spaces offer something real. We feel it in the air, in the weight of the door, in the way light falls across stone and wood. This isn't just a longing for the past, it's a response to the present. Our bodies and minds notice what's missing in many modern spaces: depth, texture, story. Walk into a century-old home and your senses shift. The floorboards creak, the windows let in a soft, uneven light. The walls may not be straight, but they hold time in their lines. The materials, brick, plaster, timber, show age, but they also show care. These places were built slowly, often by hand. That slowness lives in the structure. It calms us. Compare that to many new buildings. Drywall, laminate, plastic trim. The lines are clean, the edges sharp, the lighting bright. But something's off. The air feels flat. The surfaces don't invite touch. You don't notice details because there are so few to notice. Everything is designed to be efficient. That often means smooth and repeatable. We get repetition instead of richness. We don't just see old buildings, we sense them. Texture matters. Think about plaster. In an older home, you might run your hand across a wall and feel its slight wave, the trace of the person who troweled it. Now think about drywall. Its surface is uniform, flat, designed to disappear. Plaster holds imperfections. Those imperfections ground us. They remind us that someone was here, working, shaping, living. The same goes for floors. Walk on old hardwood and you feel it shift under your steps. It carries marks, stains, and small dents. Each one holds a moment, a dropped tool, a kid's toy, a chair scraped back during a long meal. These marks are a record, not decorative, not planned, just there. Now walk across vinyl plank. It looks like wood, but it feels like nothing. No sound, no give, no history. We crave authenticity, not because it's trendy, but because our brains know the difference. We evolved to read the world with all our senses. When spaces go flat, we lose something. Our eyes might not notice, but our bodies do. This is why people say old buildings feel warm or alive. They're not alive, of course, but they carry signs of life. Signs that our senses recognize as familiar, safe, and human. A new office lobby might smell faintly of glue and paint. An old bakery, now a bookstore, smells like flour, ink, and wood. The smells linger in the floorboards, in the dust between bricks. These aren't features someone designed. They're just what happens when time moves through a place. And that's the key. Old buildings carry time, not as an idea, but as a material. Dust settles, paint cracks, wood darkens. These changes give the space weight. This is why we trust old things, not in a conscious way, but in a sensory one. We feel the years in them, and it slows us down. That's not always a good fit for modern life, but it is often what we need. Slowness helps us notice, and noticing helps us connect to each other. to place, to the present moment. Think of an old schoolhouse converted into a community hall. The desks are gone, but the chalkboard remains. You can see the scratches from old lessons, names, numbers. When people gather there now, for meetings, classes, or meals, they become part of that story. The building holds more than its function. It holds memory. That doesn't happen in the same way in a space made last year with foam insulation and acoustic tile. It can happen, but it takes time. A lot of it. In cities, we often tear down and rebuild. We replace small, solid buildings with large, light ones. It makes sense in terms of cost and code, but it erases texture. It removes friction. Friction isn't always bad. It slows us down just enough to feel what we're doing. When a door handle is worn smooth by years of hands, we feel it. When a new one is polished chrome, we don't. There's a reason many people pay more to live in older homes or work in older buildings. They may not say it in these words, but they're reacting to sensory truth. The warmth of brick, the shadow along a carved stair, the echo of footsteps in a tall hallway. These are not style choices. They are experiences rooted in materials and time. Even the sounds matter. Old houses have their own music. Pipes knock, stairs creak, radiators hiss. These sounds form a kind of backdrop, not always pleasant, but always present. They tell us the building is working. New buildings often try to silence themselves. Thick insulation, padded floors, sealed windows. The quiet can feel strange, not peaceful, blank, like something is missing. Sometimes we try to fake the feel of old things. We use distressed wood or vintage lights or fake brick panels, but our senses often catch the lie. The wood has no wear. The lights are new bulbs in old-style fixtures. The brick doesn't smell like dust or hold heat. These tricks might fool the eye at first glance, but not the rest of us. We know when something has depth and when it's just a surface. Sensory truth doesn't mean perfection. It means presence. It means using materials that carry weight, hold heat, reflect sound, and change with age. It means making space for small flaws, for texture, for things that take time. In a world that moves fast and feels thin, we look for places that remind us we're human. Old buildings do that, not through sentiment, but through structure. They show what happens when people build with their hands, live with their senses, and stay long enough to leave a mark.